The Room in the Tower, a chilling horror story. It was a warm summer evening when James Morton received an unexpected invitation to visit the countryside estate of his old school friend, John Eastwood. James hesitated at first. He had not seen John in years, but something in the letter intrigued him. The words seemed oddly urgent, as if John needed him there for some unspoken reason. The estate, an ancient mansion called Ashwood Manor, was located deep in the English countryside, surrounded by vast, shadowy woods. As James arrived, he was met by John, who greeted him warmly, but with an underlying unease. "I'm so glad you came," John said, his eyes darting nervously to the tall, ominous tower that loomed over the manor. "Why wouldn't I? It's been too long," James replied, though he too felt the eerie presence of the tower. That evening, as they dined with John's family, the conversation was lively, but James couldn't shake a strange feeling of déjà vu. He felt as though he had been in this house before, though he was sure he never had. The sensation grew stronger when John's mother, an elderly woman with cold gray eyes, turned to him and said, "You will be sleeping in the room in the tower." At that moment, a chill ran down James's spine. He had dreamt of this moment before, many times. For years, he had been haunted by a recurring nightmare. In it, he was a guest at an old house where an unfamiliar voice always told him, "You will sleep in the room in the tower." In the dream, he would climb a long, spiraling staircase to a dimly lit room at the top of the tower. A dreadful sense of doom would overtake him before he could see what lay inside. Each time, he would wake in terror before entering. And now, reality was mirroring his nightmare. Despite his fear, James could not refuse his host's offer without seeming irrational. He nodded, forcing a smile. After dinner, a maid led him through the dark hallways of Ashwood Manor and up the winding staircase to the tower. The wooden steps creaked under his weight, and the air grew colder with each step. At last, they reached the top. The maid pushed open the door to reveal a dusty, candlelit room with a large four-poster bed. The walls were lined with old portraits, their eyes seeming to follow him. "Good night, sir," the maid said quickly before disappearing down the stairs. James hesitated, then stepped inside. He placed his bag down and lit another candle, trying to dispel the shadows that lurked in the corners. The unease from his dream returned. This was exactly how he had imagined it. The furniture, the dark wooden floor, even the scent of decay in the air. Then he noticed something that hadn't been in his dreams, a large, faded painting above the fireplace. It depicted a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. Beneath the painting, a brass plaque read, "Sebastian Ashwood, 1723 to 1765. A shiver ran through him. Exhausted, James decided to rest. He lay in bed, but sleep did not come easily. The wind howled outside, and every creak of the old house made his pulse quicken. Then, around midnight, a soft scratching noise reached his ears. It was coming from the wardrobe. James sat up, heart pounding. The scratching grew louder, turning into a slow, deliberate tapping. Tap, tap, tap. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Gathering his courage, he stepped out of bed, grabbed a candle, and approached the wardrobe. The tapping continued. With trembling hands, he flung the doors open. Nothing. The wardrobe was empty. He exhaled shakily, convincing himself it had been his imagination. But as he turned to walk back to bed, he heard something else. A whisper, "You should not have come." James spun around, but the room was empty. The candle flickered violently as if something unseen had brushed past it. The air grew colder, and the smell of decay became overwhelming. Then the door to the room slammed shut on its own. Panic gripped him. He rushed to the door, but it would not budge. The whispering continued, growing into a low, menacing murmur. James turned to face the painting of Sebastian Ashwood. The portrait had changed. The man's hollow eyes now stared directly at him, and his mouth had twisted into a grotesque grin. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. A tall, skeletal man, identical to the one in the painting, stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Leave this place, or join me forever." James screamed. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in the hallway outside the tower room. John was kneeling beside him, shaking him awake. "James, are you all right?" John asked, his face pale. James gasped for air, his body drenched in sweat. "What happened?" he stammered. John hesitated. I heard you scream and found you unconscious outside the room. You must have fainted." James shook his head. No, I saw him. The man from the painting. He was there. John's expression darkened. Sebastian Ashwood, he murmured. What do you mean? James asked. John sighed. Sebastian Ashwood was my ancestor. He was a cruel man who practiced dark rituals. One night, he locked himself in the tower and was never seen again. But people say his spirit lingers, searching for a soul to take his place. James shuddered. He needed no further proof. At dawn, he packed his bags and left Ashwood Manor, vowing never to return. Yet as he rode away, he felt unseen eyes watching him. And that night, as he tried to sleep, a voice echoed in his dreams once more. You will sleep in the room in the tower